So I'd like to welcome up David Grossman. David is the president and founder of the Grossman Group, formerly DG&A. It's a Chicago-based communications agency focusing on organizational consulting, strategic leadership development, and internal communications. Some of their clients are Cisco, and Heinz, and Intel, and Lockheed Martin. He also teaches the only graduate level course in internal communications in the United States, and he does that at Columbia University. So, David Grossman.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. You'll have to let me know how I did here. I'm really honored to be here. I so respect the diversity of experience and perspectives and expertise that's around the room, and as we are talking this morning and having dialogue, I'm continuing to value and appreciate all of that. So thank you for that, because I know collectively we're working on together trying to solve this information overload problem. I come at this, my lens is through the consulting work and research that we do, typically with large organizations that are looking to improve how leaders lead and how we communicate on the inside. In many cases, it's through times of change. How do we accelerate to get through the challenge of change faster? How do we minimize the downsides? And then how, too, do we think about turning employee confusion or apathy, skepticism into engagement as well? And I like to think about some of the work that we do, too, as we advocate for employees as well as leaders as trying to make the workplace better. So today I'm going to share with you some research that we have done. Because of so many of the media reports of late around email and banning email in the workplace or limiting email in the workplace, or it's interesting, when I left Chicago, where I'm from, yesterday, there's a case in federal court now. There's a police officer in Chicago who says that he wasn't able to get the overtime that he was due because he was answering email outside of work hours, that he was dissuaded by his bosses, and now that has moved forward. A judge in Chicago has decided there's enough evidence to continue that case. So we've been watching this trend of email and what's happening with email specifically in the workplace and in government as well, and we wanted to understand, are these blips on the radar screen? What do folks inside organizations think? So I'll share with you today some headlines from an email perception study that we did last year with corporate executives, with middle managers, and then with employees. I'll share with you some persona-like characters. So we know that bad habits are a problem. I know none of us have any bad habits when it comes to email in this room, but we wanted to find out and find a creative way to start to get people to see themselves in some of the bad habits that they do. And then I'll share with you a brief case study, a client that we worked with that has said we are going to start to get at this issue of stress and overload in the workplace. They're 5 months in, so I'll share with you what we've done together, and we're seeming to make some progress. It's a start. It's not perfect by any stretch, but at least we are moving forward. So here's the email research that we did. This was conducted last year at the C-suite level with middle managers, and we chose middle managers because in my experience and research, we often see this frozen middle inside organizations where information's coming down from the top. There's the wish, the need for direction coming from the bottom, and it seems like stuff just stops in the middle of organizations at that middle manager level. And in many cases, it's those folks that are the least qualified to be providing direction. So we wanted to specifically look at middle managers as well, and then employees too. And this was conducted with one of our partners, the LCWA Research Group. So 3 findings and headlines I'll share with you. The first is, and this was in the spirit of, is there a desire, a wish to limit email? Is email going away? What do folks think? Headline 1 is all about that email is an effective internal communication tool. And I'll share with you a couple of the data points. In each case, we'll look at the C-level, we'll look at middle managers, and then we'll look at employees as well. And overwhelmingly, they said, yes, email is still an effective tool. When you ask employees or middle managers, what do you think, what do you feel, how might you think about email? Of course, positive thoughts and feelings in green, neutral in yellow, and then negative in red. It's a huge mix across the board. I think we have a love-hate relationship with this tool in the workplace. But overall, it's still important and effective. Headline 2, workplace email does need an overhaul, but it should not be eliminated. And again, in the context of what some large organizations have been doing, or at least thinking about when it comes to email. We wanted to know how much time do people spend on email, and there's a good amount of research out there during business hours, outside of business hours, and then of all of that time, how much of that is irrelevant. So what you're seeing is info for both middle managers and for employees, and middle managers more so are feeling the brunt of and spend more time overall than employees do. It's interesting, when we got this data back, it seemed low to me when you add it all up. When it comes to what's irrelevant, which is the last stat, about 24 minutes a day for middle managers and 17 overall, which gives you about 100 hours a year. Seems low to me, but we wanted to at least get to some kind of quantification, if you will, that it is an issue and that there are and is an opportunity inside the workplace to improve how we use email. We also asked, so what do you think? What's the solution here? Do we want to limit email? Should we ban it? Is etiquette the answer? What are some possible solutions? The chart here shows red is for the corporate executives, blue for middle managers. I didn't pick that, but I know they're feeling blue, so I think it's actually appropriate given all of the data. And then lastly, gray for employees. And clearly etiquette comes to the fore as when it comes to what C-suite folks and middle managers and employees say is the solution versus limiting email or stopping it. And it's very interesting in conversations that we've had in some focus groups that followed some of this research. People have very strong feelings about their desire to control how they work, when they work, what that looks like. And there's such a need for great respect that everybody works differently. Some people like technology and want to use it more, so others don't like it as much. So headline 3, managers are especially affected by misbehaviors. So we first wanted to know, these middle managers and employees, why are they having to check email outside of the work hours? And we gave you a number of possibilities here, and it's usually for good reason, to catch up on things that didn't happen during the day, to get ready for the next day. But for middle managers as well, there was more of a feeling component, that at times they said there was a need to impress their boss, to ensure that things were moving forward, that it was part of the corporate culture. So some of the rationale from a middle manager perspective is a little bit different. And then we asked, so from a bad habit perspective, what's getting in the way? And so here are all the potential bad habits, from too much reply all, to no call to action, to wordy, to irrelevant. And what's interesting first, if you just look at this, there's not one or two solutions. There's a huge range of solutions according to those folks that we surveyed. If we are to get at this issue, there are a number of problems and challenges that we must educate people on if we are to get at information overload, especially with email. So one of the questions in all of this was, how do we raise awareness around some of the bad habits? And we borrowed from our colleagues in marketing some customer segmentation thinking and created some, what I would call, persona-like characters. How can we get people to see themselves in the bad habits, to reflect that, yes, indeed, they may be part of the solution, and get them to think about, what can I do differently? How might I change and be part of the solution to decreasing the overload I feel from email? So we created, and this is our starting thought around how might we start to get at it with employees inside large organizations. We created this series of email outlaws that start to get at some of the bad habits and to try and start to raise awareness about what needs to be different. So here's the hermit who doesn't lift her head up from the screen, emailing away when a phone call or a face-to-face conversation would be better and more efficient. The reflexive reply all automatically shares their response with everyone instead of considering who truly needs to receive the message. The motor mouth, the back and forth replier, fills your inbox with small comments that take time to sort through but rarely adds value to the conversation. Or Captain No Context, who peppers you with emails that don't let you know what it is they're emailing you about or why it's pertinent, forcing you to respond with questions and wasting everyone's time. So it's one thought, one approach, these persona-like characters, to start to get folks to think about some of the things that they may do, what they may be guilty of, to start to help improve how we email and use this great technology in the workplace. So the email persona-like characters were a part of some work in a case study that we did. And let me share that with you, and then happy to answer any questions that you have. IDEX is one of the leading diagnostic companies when it comes to animals and animal health. If you have a pet, if you take your pet to the vet regularly, which I hope you do, any of the diagnostics are provided by IDEX. 4,000 employees or so, and in their annual employee survey, stress came up as a top issue, a top concern. And so leadership wanted to dig into stress. What does that mean? What does that look like? Some follow-on research showed there were a number of reasons why employees were stressed. And of course, they did some calculations too as to what was the cost inside the organization. To get leadership to focus on it, we often have to do that math to say, yep, it's a problem, let's fix it. We have to make it better inside the workplace. And there were a number of things that caused stress, but email overload was one that came to the top. And senior leadership agreed and decided we're going to take a step forward. That is where we're going to focus. So let me share with you a little bit about what they did. There was a campaign that had a number of elements, some internal branding, that helped provide some identity and focus, some messaging, information flow, and there was a good amount of training in the process as well. Probably the thing that they did that I think was most impactful was creating some expectations corporate-wide as to how email would work. So they have a purpose and guiding principles, which essentially are their values and behaviors, how they ask people to operate inside the organization. And the CEO and senior leadership added to that some very specific expectations about email. They knew they had to get at the culture. So for example, they shared with everyone that there is not an expectation that you are answering email outside of work hours. That the average response time is 24 to 48 hours. That if you go back and forth more than 2 to 3 times, that should be a phone conversation. Or a face-to-face meeting. So they came up with these series of behaviors. And this wasn't a wish, here's how we like to do it. This was a commitment made by the CEO and his leadership team that we would add these behaviors and expectations to the overall culture. And from my perspective, that's something that's very different in this case study than some of the other organizations where I've seen great educational campaigns, but here there's actually some teeth behind it, some alignment of the leadership team as well. Education, from an education perspective, this was one of the centerpieces in the e-etiquette guide, which was shared both in hard copy and it was available electronically as well. It covered everything from how do you pick what vehicle you want to work. It sounds like, where's Dan, and standard work. So the beautiful thing about this is it was for the whole company. So there was the kind of reach and expectation where sales indeed had the same expectations as I did in marketing as well. And then there was education around how to use email effectively, how to write the perfect email, a number of other strategies there. And it was done in a way that very much was IDEX and fun and interesting with all the animals and very much fit with their culture. We also adapted the persona-like characters for them. Of course, this time they all needed to be animals to fit. So here is the ostrich who buries her head in email and sometimes forgets that a phone call or face-to-face conversation would bring better two-way understanding in long-term relationships. Here's Pavlov's dog. We had fun with this, and I think that's part of the reason why that this resonated inside their organization as well. Instinctively hits reply all to make sure everyone is kept in the loop, to stay out of the doghouse, rethink who needs to have the reply and save them the time. The parrot, the back and forth replier, is fun to chat with, but you've lost track of time and focus on your real priorities. Be concise and detailed in your first squawk. Parrot. The pony not so express, gallops with youthful enthusiasm, sharing information far and wide, but sometimes mistakenly delivers confidential or unnecessary information for unintended recipients. So, how are we doing so far? They are 5 months in. So far, they've reduced the volume of email by 15%. And the EVP of this program, and it's early on, they haven't replicated their employee survey yet, so we don't have a sense there, but is pleased because he hears people articulating the expectations and the key behaviors, that there's conversations starting to happen about what needs to happen differently when it comes to email, that everyone has a responsibility and can help be part of the solution. So some very early results, but we're feeling good about, at least directionally, what they've done and some of the results that we're seeing. And of course, there's a lot more that we're going to want to do to fine-tune the campaign over time. So, I went through a lot quickly. If you want more on the research study that I talked about, it's available on our website. There are also a couple, it's free, there are a couple other free tools. We took and have created an algorithm as well for those folks who want to find out what's email costing you in your organization, the poor use of email. Through a couple clicks, you can find out what that cost is, and we did that for many of our corporate partners who need to start to build a business case for why leadership should focus time and attention on that as well. So some resources there if that's at all helpful to you. And I buzzed through this quickly so we can get to the good part, which is dialogue. Happy to answer whatever questions you have about what we've done and how we're thinking about it, and add to the conversation here.
Okay, so in the study, sounds like it's a fairly top-down approach to how we're going to company-wide manage our email, and that's a little bit in contrast to Dan's point of how system changes like this are best adopted when they are sort of decided by the group. Was there any friction in the delivery?
So great question, and thank you for that. All of the expectations were, and I didn't mention this, they were tested in focus groups with employees as well to get some feedback. It wasn't like a lean process where they came up with the solutions. It was more of a top-down, but then we did some testing inside their culture. They thought that that was the best approach inside their organization, and I was very comfortable with that as well because there was such a sense of inside the organization, you got to fix this. Some of these solutions are so natural, they're tried and true, they've been out there. In many cases, we were more looking to just get a read on how employees were feeling. They're like, hurry up. What took you so long? These so make sense to us. Some of their questions too were more around operations. So the expectations were we had to position them that it was for 80% of situations. Because the senior leader said to us, now wait a minute, if I need someone available over the weekend, I need someone available over the weekend for a customer. So we also had to clarify that it was important to dialogue with your supervisor when there were exceptions. And it was up to the sender, it was up to the leader to say, and to let employees know when there's a time where you may need to be more at the ready than other times. So thanks for that question. Great, other questions? Please.
So I'm curious, in the survey that you did where you asked people how do you want us to work with email, and people said, well, I want people to have etiquette, but I don't necessarily want you to change how or how often, when or how often I interact with them. Where a lot of research has shown that by answering your email at home or answering your email continuously throughout the day is actually a negative thing for you. Did you have any pushback on saying, okay, well, we're not going to mess with your time, or we are going to mess with your time of accessing email? Are they really right in what they think they are, or are they just trying to reinforce what they want to do?
So is what you're asking, did they look at potentially turning off email after certain hours? Or inside, they talked about it, it didn't make sense inside their culture. They felt like the best way to approach it was these expectations, and then asking for there to be conversation between leaders and their teams about how this was going to work, and especially in different situations. Where, for customer-facing teams, there were many times that they needed to be more available. And then the flip side of this again was we got lots of feedback from employees. Do not tell me how I should be handling my work and email. That if I've got kids and I want to put my kids to bed and then want to do my flurry of emails, that's great. I should be able to work that way. And leadership reinforced that in their communications as well. And it's important, I think, for many of the senior leaders who did work that way to let their people know just because I work that way doesn't mean my expectation is you need to work that way. And so the guidelines and the expectations continue to reinforce what they did expect, which was, in general, it's about during work hours. Which, how refreshing is that? In general, if you choose to check email outside of work hours, great, but there isn't that grand expectation.
I love the personas as an effective way to communicate these behaviors, and I just wanted to contribute one to maybe add, which was one that we used at the bank that I mentioned before, and that was the alpha mailer. And the idea behind the alpha mailer was the person who would send something at 11:30 p.m. and then see a reply, and this would go on, until wee hours of the morning, until someone eventually would fall asleep and stand up, because they didn't want to be the one to leave the last word hanging.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. And I think that, the power of all this is just to create dialogue inside the organization, to create conversations about all of these issues and then some solutions to them as well. Yeah, and then we'll go.
Are you up for sharing some of these images and names for things? I like the way that I've seen other ones like that, but they've been more pejorative, and being more playful with them, with the animal icons and everything is positive.
Sure, happy to talk with you more about that. We were very careful to have them not be pejorative, and also you'll notice in the second part of each of them, there's a solution, as well. So we're trying to keep them, very fun and positive. So happy to talk with you more about that.
Yeah, I love the personas being very cute and all that. Is there a reason, though, that they were negative as opposed to being positive?
Yeah. We went back and forth. I think some of them are more positive than others. I think in some cases, to get people's attention, you need to be negative. You need to point out a potential problem. So we ended up with a mix. Great. Other questions? Yeah.
There were just a couple things I wanted to comment on and also suggest. There's an amazing book written, and one chapter in particular about email by a fellow who's now passed away named Mark Orchan. It's called Work is Broken, and you can find the PDF of it free online, and it talks about some amazing email techniques. I was also the evangelist for David Allen at Getting Things Done fame, and there's some very, very simple things that I see almost never done that save enormous time, and most of it relates to using your subject line effectively. And I'm sure you must delve into this, but simple things like just putting EOM at the end of a simple question in a subject line, so you never have to open the email, or NRN, no reply necessary. Simple codes that in 3 seconds. And for me, this was incredibly important because I was also the first employee at TechCrunch, and I would get 600 emails a day, and this was my second job. So, we had to figure out ways to manage this load. And what I found in working at David Allen is just these very simple concepts reduce this noise and this chatter and this inefficiency enormously.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great point. And I so appreciated the conversation, the diverse perspectives this morning around, is it about the people and how they use technology, or how much can technology be part of the solution? And for me, I think it's both. However, to your point, I think to the extent we can maximize the technology we already have, and as we're adding new technologies, do a smart job of educating people around whatever other tips or tricks or techniques, I think we'll definitely be better off. Great. Well, thank you for the dialogue, and look forward to continuing the conversation.
Yeah.